Hello, a very warm welcome to all of you dear, my treasured viewers, and welcome to the 7th episode of your favorite channel, Human Rights Herald. It is once again a quarter hour with the Human Rights Wizard. And I am still your humble anchor person, Ogochukwu Onoha. Today, on this 7th edition, we celebrate the virtues of 5 human rights icons. 5 personages who, because of their staunch belief in human rights, because of their staunch belief and dogged resistance to oppression, to injustice, to discrimination and persecution, eventually stood out as global icons of human rights, global icons of the oppressed, of the underprivileged, of the downtrodden. It is not the intention of this channel to give you a detailed history of these 5 icons of civil liberties and civil rights, because that will be beyond the scope of time and space that we have. But we take consolation from the fact that if you are really interested in knowing more about these 5 human liberties icons, you can always get more about them by Googling their life histories and activities. Without further ado, the first of these 5 human rights personages is Rosa Parks. Who was Rosa Parks? Rosa Parks was an African American, a black African woman in the USA at the peak of that country's policy of racial segregation. It was in December 1955, Rosa Parks was a seamstress. And at that time in the USA, at the zenith of the policy and practice of racial segregation, where the black people of America were the downtrodden, the underdogs, the undertrampled, when the black people were suffering from untold humiliation, all owing to their skin color. Rosa Parks stood out above the rest by resisting oppression, by resisting the humiliation which many had endured for many years. What did she do? At the time I am talking about, there were separate schools for white children, separate schools for black children, separate Christian churches for whites where blacks could not attend service and blacks had their own churches. And if a black person entered a supermarket or a mall to shop and there were whites there already shopping, the black had to stay outside until the whites had finished shopping before he could go in. And in public transport, if the seats in a bus had been filled up and a white person boarded the bus, any black person who had a seat had to stand up to let the white person sit down. And if more white passengers kept coming into the bus or kept boarding the bus, eventually all the blacks already seated, would be displaced. They had to stand up to let the white passengers sit. That was the situation. 1955 December was not the first time Rosa Parks had endured such a humiliation. But that day, she said enough is enough. She said it was going to end for her. So Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to the white woman who boarded the bus after her. Eventually, the bus conductor and the driver, assisted by other white people, had to force Rosa out of the bus, and she was handed over to the police. The resistance of Rosa Parks sparked off the civil rights movement in America, taking it to its zenith. And it led to the famous black bus boycott in the city of Montgomery in the state of Alabama, USA. It resulted in blacks boycotting all white-driven commercial buses, resulting in these commercial buses incurring heavy losses during the period within which Rosa Parks was under trial. Of course, the resistance of Rosa Parks contributed a great deal to bringing an end to racial segregation in America, at least as a policy. Today, the statue of Rosa Parks stands in the city of Montgomery, Alabama, as a memento, as a monument to black resistance to racial discrimination. If Rosa Parks hadn't done this, we would still be talking about blacks being oppressed officially in America today. A second black American, apart from Rosa Parks, was Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman, born in 1820, and she died in 1913. Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, I beg your pardon, was born into slavery in America, and she grew up a slave. But eventually, she escaped from the South of America, where slavery and racial segregation was more endemic. She escaped to the north through what was called the underlying railroad system. That's the railway system. A courageous woman. As a young girl, she had to return to the South 19 times, eventually helping up to 300 former slaves to escape into freedom, including her own parents. Her courage earned her the accolade, the Moses of the blacks. The Moses of the blacks. The Moses who came to the rescue of black Americans who were under slavery. When the American Civil War started, Harriet Tubman trained as a nurse and began to assist soldiers who were wounded. She was also a scout and also served as a scout and spy for the liberation forces. Isn't this story inspiring? Now, the third of these human rights heroes was Stephen Bantu Biko, a South African, more popularly known as Steve Biko. Steve Biko started his life studying to become a medical doctor, but eventually the white racial policy in apartheid South Africa made him abandon his medical studies, forcing him to devote the rest of his life to educating blacks on how to become free, how to become assertive, how to be confident and courageous in order to free themselves from the oppression of apartheid. Steve Biko was the founder of the Black Consciousness movement, through which he propagated the idea of racial equality in South Africa and encouraging the blacks in South Africa to renounce and reject the imputation of inferiority which the apartheid government was imposing on them. A famous quote credited to Steve Biko is, and I quote, "The greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed." Steve Biko believed that it is the acceptance by our minds that we are inferior, our acceptance of oppression, that emboldens the oppressor to go on with his or her nefarious conducts or activities. Operating in apartheid South Africa in the 1960s and late 1970s, Steve Biko became so fiery, so combatant in his propagation of the ideas of racial equality that in 1977, the South African police arrested him and brutalized him and tortured him and beat him so much that he eventually died in their hands. But his death made him a martyr. He became an icon, a symbol of civil rights movement all over the world. A fourth human rights personage, is one that I am sure is known to everyone: Martin Luther King Jr., popularly known as Dr. King. He was a champion of the civil rights movement in America, propagating the gospel of racial equality. He founded the modern civil rights movement in America and was an apostle of nonviolent resistance. Even though he preached nonviolence, he was not immune to the brutal American police, American judicial system under racial segregation. So, he was eventually arrested, beaten, and upon release was assassinated. The fifth, but not the least, is a young woman of our own time, Malala Yousafzai, a Pakistani young woman who as early as age 7 had already started preaching the gospel of feminine equality with the masculine. Malala Yousafzai is known all over the world as a champion of the girl-child education. She became so outspoken that in 2012, he was shot brutally by anti-girl child extremists in Pakistan, but he survived this attempted assassination, eventually winning the Nobel Prize for Human Rights Activism in 1912, becoming the youngest person to ever win the Nobel Prize. I guess we can now come back home and now ask ourselves, of what use are these inspiring accounts? There is one message which these accounts are passing across to us. These stories of heroes who stood up against oppression are meant to inspire us, to remind us that boldness is the key to success. Boldness, resoluteness, and resilience are the key to success in everything that we do in life, including, of course, the fight for our fundamental human rights. These human rights personages succeeded and became global icons because they refused to give up. Back home in Nigeria, in 2011, I was a volunteer for a human rights organization in Enugu, Nigeria, and there was an issue involving a woman of Anambra State origin. Her father had made a lot of money, but had no more than one child, that woman alone. She had no brother or sister, and her mother was late. So when eventually her father died, leaving properties running into millions of naira, her uncles shared the buildings among themselves, shared the other landed properties, and then invited her and gave her 50,000 naira. She was told that, going by custom in Igbo land, that a girl child does not inherit her father's wealth. The woman must have been searching for years, refusing to give up or to give in to the injustice to which she was subjected, until somebody referred her to the Human Rights Organization. She came in tears and narrated her ordeal. Having no money with which to hire a legal representation, the organization provided her with a pro bono service. That means the organization provided her with a lawyer who could represent her in a law court free of charge. To make a long story short, the case was decided on the first hearing. Her uncles were the defendants in the suit. They were told by the female magistrate that those who sold the land had no legal right to it. And the buyers were told that those from whom they bought the pieces of land and buildings had no legal right over the properties, and that they should go and recover their money. And so the court, therefore, ruled the girl's or the woman's father's property to her. It became a victory for the fight against female oppression in Nigeria. Of course, we need to remind ourselves that Section 42 of the Constitution of the Federation of Nigeria, as amended, makes it a crime to discriminate against any citizen of Nigeria, either on the basis of gender, of religion, of ethnicity, of disability, or on any other basis. Therefore, the custom in some parts of the country that forbids the inheritance of a family property by a girl child is null and void. That is what the preamble to the Constitution says, that any other law in Nigeria that disagrees with the Constitution, either wholly or partly, is either totally null and void or null and void to the extent of the inconsistency. Thank you very much, my wonderful viewers. Remember that you have been watching Human Rights Herald, a quarter hour with the Human Rights Wizard. And I am your humble anchor person, Ogochukwu Onoha, the Human Rights Wizard. If you have enjoyed this video, remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. There are many people out there who will need this information that we present on this channel. There are many people out there who might have problems that are human rights sensitive, problems that crystallize on their rights, and who need information to carry on in their fight to protect their dignity. You'll be doing all of us a service, therefore, if you share this video and make it get to as many people as possible, and subscribe to our channel so that you receive our future videos firsthand, and in this way you will be encouraging us to do more. Remain focused and stay away from trouble, and remember, know your rights, protect your rights and defend your rights. Thank you very much.